My name is Avery Lawson. I'm 32 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your family finally shows you where you stand is that it doesn't always arrive with screaming. Sometimes it arrives printed in black ink on a cheap paper badge. Sometimes it arrives with your mother leaning close to your ear, smiling like she's doing you a favor, and whispering a sentence so casually cruel that your whole body forgets how to move. That means no plate. That was what my mother said to me at my brother's wedding. No plate. Not no seat because of a mistake. Not, hold on, sweetheart, let me fix this. No plate. As if I were some distant acquaintance who wandered in off the street, hoping for a free salmon and a slice of cake. As if I hadn't spent months saving money for that wedding. As if the plain white envelope sitting on the gift table didn't contain a $7,500 check I had written with tired hands and a hopeful heart. A honeymoon fund check. For my brother, Ryan. For his new wife, Emma. For the future I thought I was helping them start. And unfortunately for them, I was about to take it back. I had no idea anything was wrong when I arrived at the reception venue. The church ceremony had been beautiful in the way weddings are always beautiful from a distance. Flowers everywhere, soft music, people crying into folded tissues. Ryan standing at the altar in a navy suit, looking nervous and proud, while Emma walked toward him like she was walking into the safest day of her life. I watched it all from the pew. I clapped when everyone clapped. I smiled for the photos. I told myself Ryan seemed distracted because he was a groom, and grooms were allowed to be distracted. He barely spoke to me that morning, but I didn't take it personally. That was the kind of mistake I used to make a lot. Explaining away distance. Softening disrespect. Calling cruelty stress because it hurt less than calling it truth. By the time I reached the reception check-in table, people were laughing around me, adjusting ties, fixing lipstick, holding gift bags and envelopes decorated with gold stickers. Ahead of me, a couple gave their names and received beautiful envelope-style badges trimmed in gold, their table number printed in elegant calligraphy. Then it was my turn. The woman behind the table glanced down at her list. Not at me. Just the list. Then she picked up a thin white paper badge and handed it over like she was passing me a receipt. I looked down. Limited access guest. For a second, I honestly thought it was a mistake. The words didn't make sense. Limited access? At my own brother's wedding? Before I could ask anything, my mother appeared beside me. Diane Lawson had always been good at appearing exactly when damage could be done most efficiently. She wore a pale blue dress, pearls at her throat, and the calm expression of a woman who had already decided what version of events she would tell later. She leaned close. "That means no plate," she whispered. Then she walked away. No explanation. No apology. No embarrassment. Just those 5 words, dropped into my hands like a stone. I stood there, holding that badge, while the room continued moving around me. Guests flowed past with shiny name cards and table numbers. Servers carried trays. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. And inside my head, everything went quiet. I walked into the hall anyway, because some stubborn, foolish part of me still believed there had to be another explanation. Maybe my name was under the wrong table. Maybe someone forgot to print a proper badge. Maybe my mother had misunderstood. But then I found the seating chart. My name wasn't there. Not at the family table. Not near Ryan's college friends. Not in the back. Not anywhere. No chair. No plate. No name card. I wasn't a guest. I was a loose end they hadn't bothered to hide properly. I stood near the wall and watched my family celebrate without me. My father, Mark, raised his glass. My mother clapped. Ryan kissed Emma's cheek while guests cheered and lifted their phones to take pictures. And I waited. That was the humiliating part. I waited for someone to notice. For Ryan to look over and frown. For my father to wave me toward an empty chair. For my mother to come back and say, "Avery, sweetheart, this is all mixed up." Nobody did. They saw me. That was what I understood slowly. They saw me standing there with that paper badge. They just didn't care enough to move. So I turned around and walked back toward the entrance. The gift table was quieter now. Earlier, it had been crowded with people placing boxes and envelopes beneath a framed sign that said, "Cards and blessings." Blessings. I almost laughed. My envelope was easy to find. Plain white. A little bent at one corner. No ribbon, no sticker, no decoration. Just my handwriting across the front. Ryan and Emma. I picked it up. For 1 second, I remembered how proud I had felt placing it there. How I had imagined Ryan opening it later and calling me. Maybe emotional, maybe grateful. I had skipped dinners out. Taken extra freelance projects. Delayed replacing my old laptop. All so I could give my brother something generous. Something meaningful. Something family did for family. I opened the envelope and slid out the check. Then I said, not loudly, but clearly enough for the people nearby to hear, I think you won't need this anymore. I folded the check, slipped it into my purse, and walked toward the exit. I made it maybe 10 steps before I heard the first chair scrape. Then someone called my name. Then Ryan. Avery! His voice was sharp, panicked. Behind him, my mother shouted, come back! My father's voice followed, louder, angrier. Avery, don't do this here! But I didn't stop. That was the first time in my life I understood how calm leaving could feel. I walked to my car, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot. No dramatic speech. No crying in the driveway. No final look back through the windshield. They could toast. They could dance. They could pretend the empty space where I should have been was nothing. But the honeymoon they had been so eager to afford had just become a lot less golden. They didn't want me there. Fine. But they weren't going to use me either. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I wasn't tired. I was exhausted. But every detail kept replaying in my head, like someone had burned the whole thing behind my eyelids. The badge. My mother's whisper. Ryan laughing at the head table. My envelope sitting among all those pretty gifts. By morning, the text started. First, my mother. Can we talk? Then, my father. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Then Ryan. Please don't ruin the weekend. Not one apology. Not one sentence that sounded like shame. Nobody said, we hurt you. Nobody said, you didn't deserve that. My mother actually wrote, we assumed you'd be okay with standing, since you always say you don't care about fancy things. I stared at that message for a long time. Standing. As if that was the issue. As if being denied dinner at my brother's wedding was some quirky test of humility. Around noon, my father called. I ignored it. He called again. Then came the text. Come over, we want to talk. Ryan's here too. I didn't answer right away. I showered. Made breakfast. Washed the dishes. Let them wait. That alone felt strange. Usually when my family called, I answered. When they needed something, I showed up. When there was a bill, a favor, an emergency, a ride, a repair, a loan, I became useful on command. But not that day. That day, I finished my coffee first. Then I drove over. Ryan's car was already in the driveway. So was my father's. I walked in without knocking because for years, that house had been presented to me as home whenever they needed me to behave like family. All three of them were in the living room. My mother smiled too quickly. My father nodded like he was about to lead a business meeting. Ryan stood halfway, one hand lifting awkwardly, like he couldn't decide whether to hug me or defend himself. I sat down. I said nothing. My father spoke first. It was really unfortunate how things went yesterday. Not what we did was wrong. Not we humiliated you. Just unfortunate. Like bad weather. My mother jumped in with words like logistics, pressure, confusion, oversight. Oversight. That was her favorite. As if my missing chair, missing plate, missing name, and paper badge had all been caused by a spreadsheet having a bad day. Ryan barely looked at me. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I didn't know it would feel like that. I almost smiled. Like that. He made my humiliation sound like a lighting issue. I listened. I let them talk. I let them build their soft little bridge out of excuses. And when they were done, I looked at them and said, I might change my mind. That was all. The room shifted instantly. My mother sat up. My father exhaled like he had been underwater. Ryan finally looked straight at me. There it was. Hope. Not love. Not regret. Hope. Because the money had entered the room again. My mother started talking fast, saying how generous that would be, how the honeymoon could still happen, how she didn't want one awkward moment to hang over the family forever. My father said families have rough moments. Ryan said nothing. Not even thank you. I stood. I need time to think. Then I left them sitting there with that word. Might. Not yes. Not no. Just might. And for the first time in years, they were the ones waiting on me. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Voicemail. My mother. Her voice was soft, careful, the kind of tone people use when they think they're managing someone fragile. Avery, I've been thinking. Maybe things at the wedding were handled a little too rigidly. We could have communicated better. I sat there, listening, waiting for it. The words that would have made everything different. We were wrong. I'm sorry. They never came. Instead, she circled around it, smoothed it over, reduced it. A misunderstanding. A small thing that maybe I had taken too personally. Then she added, almost casually, "We're delaying the honeymoon, just pushing it a bit." Like a flight delay. Like a weather issue. Like it had nothing to do with the fact that the $7,500 they had already mentally spent was no longer sitting in that envelope. I didn't call her back. I didn't text. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time, something uncomfortable settled in my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. Because once you see a pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. And once I saw it, everything started lining up. That afternoon, my dad called. Mark Lawson never wasted time on emotion. He liked to approach things like a negotiation. Measured. Strategic. Controlled. Avery, he said, his voice calm. I'm proud of you. I actually laughed under my breath. He kept going. You've built something stable. You're dependable. Not everyone in this family can say that. There it was. The setup. The positioning. He wasn't talking to his daughter. He was talking to an asset. We trust your judgment, he said. I know you'll make the right decision. Right. Not fair. Not respectful. Right. Meaning, beneficial to them. I didn't respond right away. And that was when something else surfaced in my mind. The car. 6 months earlier, their car had broken down. It was supposed to be temporary. A week, maybe 2. So I loaned them my second car. No paperwork. No conditions. Because that's what I had always done. Help first. Ask questions never. After that, there had been excuses. Waiting for a part. Waiting for a mechanic. The mechanic didn't show. The shop was backed up. I had stopped asking, eventually. It just became one more invisible thing I provided. One more quiet contribution that nobody acknowledged because it was expected. I opened my laptop. Logged into my insurance account. Pulled up the registration. There it was. Still in my name. Still on my policy. Still my responsibility. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and scheduled a tow. Friday morning. 9 a.m. No warning. No explanation. Just an address and a confirmation text. Friday at 9:12 a.m., my phone lit up. Mom. I let it ring. Then again. Then a third time. I picked up on the fourth. There's someone outside, she said, her voice tight. They're towing the car. Did you do this? Yes. Silence. The kind that stretches just long enough to turn into something heavier. Why? She asked. I leaned back against the couch. I'm changing insurance companies. Which wasn't a lie. Just not the whole truth. We need that car, she said quickly. We have plans. This is really inconvenient. I could hear my dad's voice in the background, already raised, already arguing with someone outside. For a second, I almost smiled. Inconvenient? I repeated. Then maybe you should borrow one, or rent, or figure something out. She didn't respond. So I added, quietly. That's what I'd have to do, right? Her voice sharpened. This is about the wedding, isn't it? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, I said, this is about patterns. And I hung up. That evening, I got my first direct message from Ryan. Can we talk? Just us? 5 words. No punctuation. No apology. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just aware. He had stood there at the reception. He had seen me. He had watched me leave with that envelope in my hand. And he had said nothing. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Then I put my phone down and walked away. 6 hours later, I replied. Soon. Not today, not tonight. Let him wait. Let all of them wait. Let them sit in the same silence they had wrapped around me like it was normal. The next day, he texted again. Please just talk to me. I didn't want it to go that way. I left it on read. Meanwhile, my parents went quiet. And that silence? It was louder than anything they had said, because it meant 2 things. They were panicking, and they were strategizing, trying to figure out how to pull me back in without admitting they had pushed me out, trying to decide how much pride they could afford to lose for $7,500. 3 days after the car was gone, I showed up at their house unannounced. I parked across the street, walked up the driveway, opened the front door like I always had. My dad was in the living room watching the news. He flinched when he saw me. That alone told me everything. My mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel like she had been rehearsing something. I didn't know you were coming, she said. I know. I sat down at the table. They didn't offer coffee. That was new. My dad muted the TV and leaned forward. We talked to Ryan, he said. He's really upset about everything. Upset. Interesting choice of word. He never intended for you to feel excluded, my mom added quickly. The wedding was chaotic. There were a lot of decisions. I held up a hand. She stopped. I let the silence sit for a second. Then I asked, Have you booked the honeymoon yet? They exchanged a glance. No, my dad said. We're still figuring it out. Of course they were. I nodded slowly. Then I said, I might be able to help. The shift was immediate. My mom straightened. My dad's shoulders relaxed. Hope again. That same, thick, desperate hope. But, I continued, I was thinking maybe I'd do it as a loan. The room froze. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just still. What kind of loan? My dad asked carefully. Monthly repayments, I said. With interest. Nothing crazy. Just fair. My mom blinked, like she hadn't understood the language. But it was a gift, she said. It was going to be, I replied. I leaned forward slightly. Then you handed me a paper badge and told me I didn't get a plate. Silence. Heavy this time. Real. My dad looked down at his hands. My mom's eyes filled, but no tears fell. I'd also like the family group chat shut down, I added. I'm not reading another message about pool parties or brunch plans unless I'm actually treated like part of this family. Avery, my mom started. I stood up. Or, I said calmly, you can figure it out without me. I walked toward the door. No raised voices this time. No shouting. Just quiet. The kind that settles when people realize something fundamental has changed. I had just reached my car when Ryan pulled into the driveway. He jumped out before the engine was even fully off. Avery, wait. I stopped. He looked different. Tired. Not performative. Not polished. Just worn down. And that threw me more than anything else. I know they screwed up, he said. I know I did too. I didn't respond. But you've made your point, he continued, okay? You don't have to keep doing this. Doing this. Like I was the one escalating. Like reclaiming my own things was some kind of punishment. I asked Dad for help, he said. I didn't know they were going to treat you like that. I tilted my head slightly. You didn't know, I repeated. Or you didn't say anything when you saw it happening. He hesitated. That was enough. I saw you, I said quietly. Standing off to the side. Watching. saying nothing. He swallowed. I meant the gift, I added. Every dollar of it. He nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. Just nodded. And for a second, I wondered if that was the closest thing to honesty I was going to get from him. I got into my car, closed the door, and drove away. That night, I received a message I wasn't expecting. From Emma, Ryan's new wife. Hey, I don't know everything that happened, but I just want to say I'm really sorry. I saw what they did. You didn't deserve that. I read it twice, then a third time, and something inside me softened just a fraction. Not enough to change anything, but enough to recognize the difference. She had seen it, and she had named it. I replied. Thank you, I appreciate that. She answered almost immediately. I just wish you'd stayed. I think things might have played out differently. I didn't agree, but I didn't argue either, because she was the only one in that entire situation who had shown even a basic sense of right and wrong, and I wasn't going to punish that. Ryan didn't message me again after that. My parents stayed quiet, waiting, hoping, calculating. They thought I was still deciding, still turning it over in my head. Still that same version of Avery who would eventually come back, soften, apologize for reacting too strongly, and hand over the check with a smile. But they were wrong. I wasn't deciding. I was remembering. And the more I remembered, the less I wanted to give them anything at all. The silence stretched longer than any argument ever had. No calls, no checking in, no carefully worded messages pretending to care. Just nothing. And for a while, I let it stay that way. Because silence, I was starting to understand, wasn't empty. It was information. It told me exactly how long they were willing to wait before reaching for me again. It told me how confident they were that I'd eventually fold. It told me they still believed I was predictable, that I would come back. That I always did. 3 days later, I broke the silence first. Not with emotion. Not with reconciliation. With a question. Are you still delaying the honeymoon? My mom replied in under 2 minutes. Of course she did. Yes, haven't booked anything yet. We're just seeing how things play out. I stared at the message. Seeing how things play out. Translation? Waiting to see if I'd give them the money. So I typed, so you're still waiting to see if I'll help. This time, there was a pause. A longer one. Then, we're hoping, yes, but it's your decision. We're not pressuring you. I almost smiled. That careful wording. That soft manipulation. We're not pressuring you. Just reminding you that you're the reason everything is on hold. Just gently placing the weight back where it always belonged. On me. I didn't reply. I let a full day pass. Then I sent another message. I spoke to a financial advisor. If I do anything, it'll be formal. Contract, interest, written terms, no exceptions. Hours passed. Nothing. Then my dad texted me directly. Are you serious right now? I didn't answer. Because that question told me everything I needed to know. Not, why would you feel this way? Not, how did we hurt you this much? Just, are you serious about not letting us take from you for free anymore? That night, my mom tried again. Maybe we should all sit down and talk calmly. I sent a thumbs up. Nothing else. Sunday dinner came 2 days later. I showed up. Not because I wanted to fix anything, but because I wanted to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. Same table. Same plates. Same quiet tension that sat under everything like a low hum. My sister Lindsay was already there. Of course she was. Leaning back in her chair, scrolling through her phone like the world owed her entertainment. She glanced up when I walked in. Rolled her eyes. It's cute, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. How you still show up like you matter. My dad chuckled. Actually chuckled. My mom kept eating like she hadn't heard it. And something inside me clicked. Not snapped. Not broke. Just clicked into place. Because in that moment, everything became simple. Clear. There was no misunderstanding. No miscommunication. No complicated emotional puzzle to solve. This was who they were. And this was who I had been to them. Useful. Optional.
Replaceable.
I picked up my fork, took a bite, said nothing. And that silence? It unsettled them more than any argument ever could have. 3 days later, I started cutting the strings.
Quietly.
Methodically. First, the vacation home. They had signed it over to me years ago because they didn't want to deal with the taxes. At the time, it had felt like trust. Like responsibility. Like something shared. But legally, it was mine. So I sold it. No announcement. No warning. Just paperwork and signatures. Then the subscriptions. Streaming services. Shared accounts. Utilities that somehow always ended up in my name. Cancelled. All of them. One by one. Clean.
Final.
That night, my phone lit up. Ryan. Why is everything disconnected? The family group chat exploded seconds later. Messages stacking on top of each other. What happened? Did you do this? Call me. Avery, this isn't funny. My dad's number flashed on my screen. Then another. Then another. And finally, a call from a lawyer. I didn't answer. Not a single one. Instead, I got in my car and drove somewhere else. To Jake. My younger brother. The only one who hadn't laughed. The only one who hadn't looked away like it wasn't his problem. His apartment was small, barely furnished. A couch that looked like it had been rescued from someone else's curb. A table that leaned slightly to the left. I knocked once and walked in. He was on the floor, trying to fix a chair with a screwdriver that didn't quite fit. He looked up.
Blinking.
Avery? I held up a bag. I brought food. He stared at it for a second, then nodded. Thanks. We sat on that uneven couch and ate frozen meals straight from the containers. No ceremony. No tension. Just quiet. Real quiet. I'm working extra hours, he said after a while. I'm gonna start paying you back more. Maybe $150 a month instead of $100. I looked at him. Why? He shrugged. Feels right. That was it. No excuses. No manipulation. No expectation that I'd wave it off. Just accountability. And for some reason, that hit harder than anything else that week. They're freaking out, he added. More than ever. I nodded. I figured. Dad tried to log into my email last week, Jake said. I caught the attempt. I didn't even react. Sounds about right. He hesitated, then said something quieter. Lindsay told me they might try to go after you. I glanced at him. What does that mean? She didn't say exactly, he admitted, just that they're gonna make you regret turning your back on blood. I leaned back against the couch. Let the words settle. It wasn't a direct threat, but it wasn't nothing either. Jake watched my face carefully. I don't think they know what to do without you, he said. I let out a slow breath. That's the problem, I replied. They never knew what to do with me either. By the time I got home that night, everything was quiet again. No new messages. No missed calls. Just stillness. I sat on my couch staring at my phone. And then, a notification. Jake's payment. On time. Exactly what he said it would be. No drama. No delay. Just done. I smiled. Because that, more than anything else, told me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unreasonable. I wasn't making things bigger than they needed to be. I had just stopped accepting a system where I gave everything and got nothing in return. And the moment I stepped out of that system, it started to collapse. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop. Family Fallout. I hadn't touched it in days. But now, I wanted to see the numbers. Every payment I had stopped. Every account I had closed. Every expense I had quietly carried for years. I added it up. $11,052 saved. Then I calculated what I had spent on Jake.
Deposit.
Rent. Food. Utilities. $3,135. I stared at the final number. $7,917. That was what I had kept, what I would have lost, if I had stayed exactly who they expected me to be. And for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt something else. Something quieter. Something steadier.
Control. 3 months.
That's how long it took for everything to finally settle into something that looked like a new normal. Not for them. For me. In those 3 months, my phone never rang with my mother's name. No soft-voiced voicemails pretending nothing serious had happened. No just checking in texts wrapped in quiet guilt. My father didn't call either. Not once. Which told me more than any argument ever could. Because if there had been a way to pull me back in without admitting fault, he would have found it. Lindsay never reached out. Of course she didn't. People like her don't apologize. They rewrite. They reshape. They tell a version of the story where they're still right, even when the evidence says otherwise. I heard things, though. Not directly. Never directly. Always through someone else. Jake, mostly. Sometimes a cousin. Once, by accident, at a gas station. Jake told me Lindsay had tried to open another store credit card using my information. That one got shut down before it even processed. I reported it. Filed it away. Moved on. That was the strangest part. It didn't even shock me anymore. It just fit. Like everything else finally had context. Jake was still in that small apartment. Still working 2 jobs. Still sending payments. Sometimes $200. Sometimes $120. Once just $80. But always on time. Always with a note. Still trying. And somehow, that meant more to me than every empty promise I had ever heard from the rest of them combined. He called me one night after work. Said he'd been looking into HVAC certification classes. Night courses. Affordable, but still more than he could handle all at once. He didn't ask me for help. Didn't even hint at it. He just said it out loud. Like he was testing the weight of the idea. I told him what I had already decided days earlier. If you keep making your payments, I'll cover it as a loan. No hesitation. No emotion. Just terms. He nodded. That's fair. And that was the end of it. No guilt. No pressure. No performance. Just agreement. Meanwhile, back at the house I used to call home, things were falling apart in quieter, uglier ways. Lindsay had moved back in. Not temporarily. Not just until things stabilize. Fully.
Permanently.
Her Audi had been repossessed after she missed another round of payments. Jake said she replaced it with a 10-year-old Honda she paid for in cash. Probably scraped together from whatever she had left. Or borrowed. Or demanded. She still walked around like she ran the place. Still gave orders. Still blamed everyone else when something went wrong. Some things never change. My father had retreated. Not physically.
Emotionally.
Jake said he spent most of his time in the basement now.
Recliner. TV.
Beer in hand. The volume low. Like he was trying to disappear inside his own house. Jake stopped going down there entirely. Feels like a museum of disappointment, he told me once. I didn't ask him to explain. I already understood. My mother had adapted the only way she knew how. Control the small things. Ignore the big ones. She rearranged the kitchen. Reorganized drawers. Relabeled containers no one used. Moved furniture around like she could shift reality by changing the shape of a room. That had always been her pattern. If the big picture broke, she focused on the details. Pretended control in one place could compensate for chaos everywhere else. They told people stories about me. Of course they did. That I abandoned the family. That I turned my back on blood. That I cared more about money than relationships. They left out the details. The years of support. The unpaid loans. The quiet sacrifices. The paper badge, The whisper. No plate. People notice what's missing from a story, even when no one says it out loud. I ran into my Uncle Brad at a gas station one afternoon. He looked at me like he wasn't sure how close he was allowed to stand. Then he nodded. Heard they're still mad, he said. I shrugged. Heard you're still winning, he added. I didn't respond. He smiled slightly. Most of us think you did the right thing, he said. We just didn't know how to say it without blowing everything up. That didn't surprise me. Silence runs in families. Then he said something that stayed with me. It's probably a relief, not being needed anymore. I leaned against my car. Thought about it. About every call I used to answer. Every problem I used to fix. Every expectation I used to meet without question. And I realized he was right. It was a relief. Because being needed had never meant being valued. It had only meant being used. 3 months later, my life looked different. Quieter. Cleaner. Mine. No late-night calls asking for money. No group chats filled with plans I wasn't actually included in. No pretending. My bank account stayed full. My apartment stayed peaceful. My phone only rang when someone I chose to keep in my life needed me. Jake sent me a photo one evening.
A course catalog.
One section circled.
H. V. A. C. Certification.
I smiled. He was building something. Slowly. Honestly. Without shortcuts. Without expectations. Without leaning on anyone who didn't want to help him. And me? I didn't forgive them. I didn't forget. I didn't need to. Because forgiveness wasn't the point. Understanding was. Distance was. Proof was. Peace was. Sometimes I still hear things. My mother telling her church group I abandoned them. My father ranting about how I stole the house. Lindsay claiming I ruined her credit. They'll keep telling their version. They need to. Because the truth doesn't make them look good. The truth is simple. I stopped letting them drain me. And they called it betrayal. I set boundaries. And they called it cruelty. I stopped carrying the weight of an entire family that never once asked if I was okay. And they said I dropped them. But here's what they still don't understand. You can't abandon people who were never standing beside you in the first place. And you can't lose a family you were never really part of. The last time I checked my account that night, Jake's payment had come through. On time. No reminder needed. No excuse attached. Just a quiet confirmation that something honest still existed in all of this. I set my phone down, leaned back, and let the silence settle around me. Not heavy. Not empty. Just peaceful. For the first time in a long time, everything I had was mine.